This happened a while ago when I had moved into my own place for the first time. My parents had lent me money for a place, so I decided to move into a duplex type house by myself. Anyway, about a month of living there, I had gotten settled in and became quite friendly with my neighbors. One morning I went to the mailbox to get bills and stuff, and I noticed that someone had broken it open. The metal lock on the back looked like it was shimmied off or something like that. I looked inside and mail was there, but it was all open and put back in their ripped envelopes. At the time, I didn't think much of it, and I was just pissed off. Jump forward a few days, and it's early morning. I had got up and was about to go to work, and I opened my door to walk to my car, and that's when I realized I had forgotten my tablet. I walked back inside and walked back to the front door to see a man in a hoodie standing outside my door. I dropped my stuff and let out a little squealing sound. I was more surprised than scared. He was outside my door at this point. All I could think was, "Hi?" He didn't say anything back. I picked up my stuff and walked towards the door to speak to him when I saw he was holding a backflip knife in his hand. I screamed as loud as I could and ran into my house, not looking back. I ran to the bathroom directly down the main hall of the house and locked myself in. It was a sliding door. I curled up on the floor and listened. I could hear him walking down my hallway. I just continued to scream as loud as I could. Here's the great part about living in a duplex. My neighbors were a married couple in their early 60s who at the time were sitting down for breakfast. I didn't know at the time, but the husband was an ex-police officer. I'll switch over to what happened through the eyes of my neighbor from what I heard and what they told me. I'll call the ex-cop Bill. They were eating when they faintly heard me scream for the first time when I saw him at the door. When I started screaming at the top of my lungs, Bill obviously thought something was wrong. He stuffed his gun under his belt just in case. You could see the bathroom from my front door, and remember that the front door is wide open. Bill arrived at my front door to see the guy with the knife in his hands and his face pressed up against the bathroom door. Bill drew his gun and screamed, "I don't know who the fuck you are, but you better drop the fucking knife." I hear this through the door and I immediately feel a sense of relief, but also of adrenaline. Now this is where I say that I tell you that until you've heard gunshots in a confined space, you don't realize how loud they are. Apparently the guy didn't take the hint from Bill and ran at him with a knife. 3 deafening shots rang out. "Stay in there for the time being," I heard. I recognized the voice immediately as Bill's. I was never more relieved in my life. Long story short, Bill got near 3 perfect shots on the guy's shoulders, enough to stop him in his tracks. The police came within minutes and took the guy away in an ambulance. Apparently, he had been watching my house ever since I moved in, and was a prior sex offender. So, if it wasn't for my neighbors, I probably wouldn't be writing this right now. This is a story that I'm not supposed to be telling, a family secret that I'm not even supposed to know about. When my grandfather was younger, he became the principal of an elementary school. He was in his late 20s and early 30s at the time, and despite being young, he was a born natural leader. I can attest to that, as I attended multiple award ceremonies for him, and the respect and admiration he received was crazy. There was a young boy at the school who was having behavioral issues in class, and my grandfather saw that the kid didn't have a lot of parental support. So he called the kid's father in and had a talk with him about spending more time with his son and just a general parenting session. It turned out that all the boy needed was his dad's attention, and after the few weeks, he was happy, even a model student. Whenever my grandfather would leave school late, he would see the dad was playing basketball with his son after he got off from work. It was one of those moments he took great pride in, being able to make a difference in people's lives. However, not everything had an easy solution, and my grandfather found himself having to deal with an employee, Stanley, the janitor, who was showing up to work drunk. Stanley was an alcoholic with a mean streak, and my grandfather tried on multiple occasions dealing with his behavior. One day Stanley showed up so drunk that my grandfather sent him home and called the superintendent to let him know that he was going to fire him the morning after. He then warned them to let him deal with it when Stanley was sober because he wasn't a stable person at all. And as it goes in these kind of stories, the superintendent was furious and decided he was going to call Stanley himself and fire him despite my grandfather's warnings. No one called my grandfather to tell him about it either, so he was completely in the dark and thought he could deal with it in the morning. Stanley was furious and went to the school that evening. He searched the offices, my grandfather's included, and tore things apart until he had finally gotten what he wanted. He was in a blaze of fury, and on his way out, he saw the father and his son playing basketball. He walked towards them and pulled out something from his trousers. It was a gun. He then proceeded to shoot the little boy, killing him instantly. The father was so upset and was hysterically crying, but somehow managed to get the gun away from Stanley and shoot him. My grandfather was called to the elementary school immediately by the police because there were 2 dead bodies. The little boy and Stanley were dead, but what was even worse was the crying from the father and him saying that he couldn't save his son. It was clear that he would never forgive himself for that day. My grandfather was pulled aside by one of the police who had searched Stanley for evidence. They had found a hit list of the people that he was going to kill and all the addresses of those people. Apparently, that's what he had gotten when he searched all the offices. My grandfather was number 1 on that list. So if it weren't for that father, it's likely that I've never would have been able to meet my grandfather, and possibly my mother and grandmother would have been killed also if Stanley had completed his mission. To this day, I get goosebumps whenever I hear that story, and it's just so chilling. My grandfather never uttered a single word about this after his initial recount, and my mother made me swear that I would never tell him I knew. He carried the weight of that boy's death on him until the day he died. So Stanley, I'm glad we had never met, and I never want to meet you. You were stopped before you could cause more harm. Edit. Just looked up some records online and spoke with my mother. There was another man who Stanley had killed. He had killed another janitor that evening, and he hadn't thought the boy and his father had seen him. So then Stanley tried to shoot the father and wrestled with the man to get the gun. In that process, it went off and killed the boy. Sorry for the mistake in the story. It makes it almost worse. This happened a while back when I was still a junior in college. After becoming upperclassmen, students living on campus didn't have to live in a dorm room or in a sorority or fraternity house anymore. Because they were given the option to rent an actual apartment at the college, that's exactly what I did, the first chance I got. The apartments were nice, swell appliances, a lot more space in a dorm, and a lot more privacy. The particular apartment assigned to me was 2 stories instead of 1 like some of the others. It was great, and I kinda felt like more of an adult because I had house keys. Anywho, I had quite a bit of classes, clubs, sports, and other miscellaneous activities during the day, so I wasn't home a lot during the week. But on weekends, I basically had the whole place to myself. Unless I had a not very rare cross-country meet or art show 2 states away. My roommate Cindy, though, was a total insomniac. So she'd do her thing during the day and usually went on walks or out with friends at night. She'd often come back late, or early, depends on how you look at it, at like 4 in the morning. I honestly had no freaking clue when she slept, so our apartment is usually empty or occupying 1 sleepy person. We got robbed a lot, like a lot, super often, probably like twice a month. I complained a bunch to the administrators, but they couldn't really do anything, and in the back of my mind, I knew that. The front door's locks weren't broken, the windows had locks, and the robberies just somehow happened. They'd pick the lock or find an open window on a hot day, even if it was on the 2nd story, and steal our crappy 90s television set or even our microwave oven. Clearly, they were running out of things to take. We were college students, so we didn't have too many valuables. I mainly complained because it wasn't really the ideal situation, but I'd never woken up to see anything stolen, so a majority of the robberies were in broad daylight when I was at class, which was a little strange, or sometimes when I came back from 4-day road trips. It wasn't so unnerving because no one ever broke in when I was sleeping, but it was still really annoying. Looking back on it now, it was weird how the robberies took place at really precise times, like when Sid went home for the weekend and I was in Missouri for a fundraiser, or while I was at a night class and my roommate was at a friend's house. It was quite clear whoever was breaking in and stealing our shit knew our schedules to some extent, because there was never an incident while either of us were there. But even so, I should still have gotten out of there before what happened did happen. Cindy was at a concert, and I didn't expect her to be home until the horizon started to brighten. I was going to do a haunted house with some buddies for Halloween, something the college was putting on to raise money for nicer books and maybe better locks on the doors. But my friend Sarah bailed last minute, presumably to go fuck someone, and her cousin Matt had gotten himself sick, So we were scheduled pretty late into the night. I wasn't feeling so great either though, so I wasn't too bummed and took to curling up on my sofa and watching Slumdog Millionaire. I ended up falling asleep there on the first floor and awoke a few hours later when Satan was literally scraping out my uterus with a rusty knife. I retrieved some Tylenol from the bathroom and filled a glass in the kitchen, downing the pills. I turned to go upstairs to my bedroom when I noticed my roommate standing by the fridge. I was half asleep and in pain, so I tried to say something like, "I thought you'd be home later," but it came out more like, "I thought, what?" And I gave up. Sid didn't say anything though. She just stood there, barely moving or breathing. "You okay?" I asked, sounding almost like a regular human being again, but she didn't react anyway. I shrugged and pushed past her to get to the fridge, suddenly very hungry. I took out an apple and munched on it, still chatting with her, asking how the concert was. A few times I thought I saw her nod, but it was dark and I couldn't make out her face. "Okay, well, night I guess." She was still stiff as a board, unwavering as I headed up the stairs and into my room. The next morning I woke up around noon because, why not, and grabbed a bowl of cereal. Sitting down at the small table, I noticed the kitchen looked different, and upon further inspection, realized our second microwave oven was missing. "What the fuck?" was my first response, and after briefly talking to myself, my phone rang, scaring the absolute living shit out of me. "Hey," came Cindy's voice through the line. "Sorry, I know I said be home last night, but we got caught up in something and lost track of time. I have class in an hour. Can you come pick me up?" So, apparently I had talked to the microwave oven thief for like 30 minutes, thinking it was my roommate. So, let's not meet. This happened about 4 years ago. At the time, I was around 8 months pregnant, so very noticeable, and was doing some Christmas shopping at the local mall. It was around 9 at night. I finished up my shopping and headed out the mall towards my truck. At this mall, there is a road that goes around the mall, and parking is on the other side of this road. Therefore, you have to cross the road to get to the parking area. As I am leaving the store, I happen to notice a man standing in the middle of the road. He looked in my direction, and we made eye contact. I looked away immediately and kept going. At the same time, there are 2 men that walk past him and go into the mall. He never looks at them or says anything to them, but he kept his eyes focused on me. I noticed that he started to walk in my direction, but I just kept strolling to my vehicle. Then I hear, "Excuse me, can you help me?" Being Southern has its downfalls, and one of those is having it ingrained into you to be polite. I simply just asked, "What do you need?" He looked around and said, "Can you help me start my car? I think my battery's dead." I may be Southern, but I'm not that polite, nor am I stupid. Please remember that I'm very much pregnant, and a woman walking alone in a parking lot. If he was really having car trouble, it is likely that he wouldn't ask a pregnant woman for help, rather than 2 men who would just walk past him. At this point, I knew it was time to go, so I just said, "Sorry, I can't help," and kept on walking, a little faster this time. I still see him out of the corner of my eye, following me. I have my keys out and I'm ready to go as soon as I make it to the truck. He was still coming though. "You really aren't gonna help me? I just need a jump." Again, I said, "No, I'm sorry." Finally, I got to the truck, unlocked it, and jumped in. He is practically running towards me now. I locked the doors and tried to get the keys into the ignition, but I was shaking, and at the moment the damn key just wouldn't fit into the ignition. He got to the truck and hit my windows, saying, "I just need your help for a minute." Now, I'm starting to get angry and yell, "No! Get the hell away from me!" He grabs the door handle and tries to open my door and screams, "Just open the door!" Here is where I lost my cool and made a split-second decision. I have my concealed carry license because there have been other reasons that I needed protection, and I won't go into that here. However, I did have a .38 caliber special in my console that I do know how to use. When he tried to open my door, my only thought was to protect my child and myself. I rolled the window down, grabbed the .38 and pointed it right in his face and said, "I'm not gonna tell you again. Get the fuck away from me." He stood there for a moment, in shock I'm sure. In that moment, time stopped. I didn't know what he would do, but I knew that I was prepared to use this gun if he made any moves towards me. Thankfully, he didn't. He didn't say a word. He turned around and ran away. I knew I should have gotten the hell out of Dodge, but just then I couldn't. All I could do was sit there in shock. I was terrified of not only what he may have done to me, but also that I had just threatened to kill someone, not a situation I ever hope to be in again. However, should it happen, I still have the .38 caliber, and it is loaded and ready to go. So man at the mall, I hope we never meet again.